My family let me pay for the entire party. Food, decor, music, and equipment rental. And when the guests arrived, they called the police and claimed I was a trespasser. The officer's hand was already on his belt when my mother decided I was no longer family. She stood in the driveway of my own vacation house, watching me get removed like a stranger, and my sister filmed it like she'd been waiting for this scene her whole life. I laughed once, not because it was funny. Leave? I repeated, looking past him at the house I'd paid for every month for 4 years. This is private property, ma'am, he said. The homeowner reported an unauthorized person on the premises. Behind him, in the driveway of my lake house outside Traverse City, Michigan, my mother, Denise Caldwell, crossed her arms with that soft, wounded look she used when she wanted the world to believe she was surviving me. I knew that face. She'd used it when I was 14, and she told my principal I'd stolen cash from her purse. Cash I'd earned pulling weeds for neighbors. Cash she had taken, then called missing. My sister Brooke stood beside her, phone raised. Of course she was recording. Officer, I said, keeping my voice flat because anything sharper would be used against me. My name is Harper Caldwell. This house is in my name. I have the deed, mortgage records, utility bills. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. I was calm, so calm my nails were cutting crescents into my palms. I am calm, I said. I'm not leaving my own house. The younger officer looked from me to my mother. Mrs. Caldwell, you called this in? Denise's voice trembled on command. I don't know this woman. She showed up saying she owns the house, but our family has used this place for years. It belonged to my late husband's side. That's not true, I said too loudly. I pulled it back immediately. My father left me money when he died 3 years ago. I used it for the down payment. This house is mine. Only mine. Brooke sighed, soft and rehearsed. She's been like this since Dad died, she said. Obsessed with the house. It's honestly sad. The older officer's expression changed. Not belief, not yet. Something worse. The careful patience people use when they think you're unstable but harmless. Do you have proof of ownership on you? It's inside, I said. In the office. I can show you. You're not going inside until we verify your identity. That was when I understood. They had built the story before I arrived. Denise was the grieving widow. Brooke was the concerned daughter. I was the erratic one at the door, insisting a family house belonged to me. So I left. Not because they were right, because fighting 2 cops on my own front porch would only give my mother exactly what she wanted. I walked to my car, drove to the end of the driveway, and called my attorney. I bought the house 4 years earlier, after my father died, and left me $75,000. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough for a down payment on a small lakefront property that had sat unsold for months because it needed work. The deck sagged. The water heater coughed like it hated mornings. The paint inside looked like someone had given up halfway through a renovation. I loved it immediately. Denise hated that. That money was supposed to go toward your future, she'd said, not some ridiculous vacation house you'll barely use. I will use it, I told her, and it's an investment. An investment. She laughed in that thin, brittle way that always meant the blade was coming. You're 32, Harper. You should be thinking about stability, not playing house in Michigan. I bought it anyway. My name only. Mortgage from my checking account. Insurance from my account. Utilities from my account. Security system with cloud camera storage because the house was 2 hours from my apartment in Indianapolis and I couldn't check on it every week. For 2 years, I spent nearly every weekend there. I sanded the deck until my shoulders burned. Painted the kitchen twice because the first color looked wrong in morning light. Replaced the water heater. Learned which boards creaked. Learned how the wind sounded against the upstairs windows before storms. I made it mine quietly. Then Denise asked to use it for Brooke's birthday. Just one weekend, she said. You're not using it anyway, are you? And Brooke would love somewhere special. I said yes, because saying no in my family never stayed no. It became selfish, ungrateful, difficult. The party was fine, mostly. They cleaned up enough that I couldn't complain without sounding petty. Denise called afterward with a warm voice she only used when she was preparing to ask for more. After that, the requests multiplied. Could Brooke have a girls' weekend there? Could Denise host her book club? Could the family use it for Memorial Day? Each yes made the next no harder, and I didn't notice the pattern until they had already started treating my house like I was the guest. By the time I understood I had paid for my own erasure, the party was already happening without me. My name was on the mortgage, but my mother had somehow made me feel like I needed permission to stand in the doorway. They asked for Thanksgiving next. Denise said her condo was too small, Brooke's fiance's family was used to space, and the lake house just made sense. I said yes. I kept saying yes because every no felt like walking directly into the version of me they had spent years describing. Selfish, cold, still bitter, unable to let things go, and I paid for all of it. Extra groceries, cleaning crews, replacement towels, a cracked patio chair, a broken cabinet hinge, a plumber after someone flushed something they shouldn't have and nobody admitted it. Then 3 weeks ago, Brooke called. "I'm getting married," she said. I smiled before I could stop myself. For 1 second, I forgot who we were to each other. "We're thinking Labor Day weekend," she said, and I was hoping, "Harper, would it be okay if we used your lake house for the engagement party?" There it was. Not "can I see you," not "I want you there." The house. "It would be perfect," she added, "right on the water. Enough room for everyone." "Sure," I said, because my throat had already closed around the other answer. "Amazing. Thank you. I knew you'd understand." She hung up before I could ask anything. How many people? What day? What exactly were they planning? 2 weeks later, Denise sent a Venmo request for $4,200, catering deposit and party supplies. No explanation. No "could you?" Just the quiet confidence of someone billing a person she had trained not to object. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over decline. Then I paid it. Because in my family, being used was still treated like being included. I drove to Traverse City that Friday afternoon, planning to help set up for Brooke's party on Saturday. I brought groceries, fresh flowers for the tables, and an expensive bottle of champagne I'd spent 10 minutes choosing because I wanted stupidly to get it right. When I pulled into the driveway at 4:37 p.m., the house was already full. Caterers moved through my kitchen. A bartender arranged bottles on my deck. 2 men carried rental chairs across my lawn, while Brooke pointed toward the water like she owned the horizon. Denise stood in the doorway with a clipboard, running the place like an event venue she had booked months in advance. When she saw me, her face shifted. Surprise first, then irritation, then the smile. "Harper, you're early. I texted that I'd be here by 5, I said, lifting the bags from my trunk. "I brought supplies." "Oh, we've got everything handled." She didn't reach for a single bag. Then her eyes moved over my shoulder, like she was checking whether anyone important could hear us. "Actually, why don't you come back tomorrow, around 2? I stopped. "Come back tomorrow? It's chaotic right now," she said. "We have a system." "Mom, I drove 2 hours to help." "I know, sweetie." Her voice softened in the way that always made the insult worse. "But it's just easier if we finish setup ourselves. You understand." I didn't, but I knew that tone. It meant any resistance would be filed under unstable. "So what am I supposed to do?" I asked. "Get a hotel nearby, make a weekend of it, treat yourself." Her smile brightened like she'd given me a gift. "We'll see you tomorrow." Then she stepped back inside my house and closed the door part way. Not all the way, just enough. I stood in the driveway holding grocery bags I had paid for, feeling 7 years old again, waiting to be told there wasn't room for me at the table. Brooke appeared a moment later with her phone against her ear. She saw me, lowered it, and made the face she used when she wanted credit for being gentle. "Did Mom talk to you?" "She told me to come back tomorrow." Brooke bit her lip. "Yeah, we just have a specific vision for the party, and we kind of need to execute it without distractions." "Distractions?" "You know what I mean," she said quickly. "You get particular about things, and it's just easier if—" She waved one hand, already bored with the conversation. "Anyway, thanks for letting us use the house. It's going to be amazing." Then she went back inside. I loaded the groceries back into my car. The flowers sat beside me on the passenger seat, their stems sweating through brown paper. I drove to a Hampton Inn 8 miles away and told myself they were stressed, that weddings made people weird, that I was too sensitive, that this was regular family dysfunction, not something colder. I came back the next day at 1:47 p.m., 13 minutes early enough to be useful, not early enough to be accused. The driveway was packed. Music floated from the backyard, white tents stood over the lawn, balloon arches framed the lake. People in linen dresses and sport coats moved around with drinks in their hands, laughing like they had all been invited into something beautiful. I parked on the street and walked up carrying the champagne. Denise was at the front door speaking to a woman I didn't recognize. When she saw me, her whole body stiffened. "Harper!" My name came out like a warning. "What are you doing here?" For a second, the question made no sense. I'm here for the party, I said. Brooke's engagement party, at my house. Denise didn't blink. She turned slightly toward the woman beside her, who had expensive highlights, a stiff smile, and the alert posture of someone sensing a private mess becoming public. And then my mother lowered her voice. Not enough. The lie wasn't slipping anymore. It was settling in, solid, permanent, like it had always been there. And the worst part? Everyone else was already treating it like truth. This is my daughter, my mother said, her tone soft, apologetic, like I was something she had to explain away. Harper, this is Cynthia, the wedding planner. Cynthia extended her hand. I shook it automatically, my mind lagging behind the moment. Wedding planner? I repeated. For the ceremony, she said brightly. Your mom was just walking me through the space. This venue is incredible. Right on the water. That deck? Your sister is so lucky to have family property like this. Family property. The words didn't hit all at once. They spread, cold, slow. My mother's fingers closed around my arm, tighter than necessary. Harper, can we talk inside? She didn't wait for an answer, just steered me through the front door, past clusters of strangers laughing in my living room, into the kitchen where caterers plated food like none of this belonged to me. What's going on? I asked quietly. Nothing, she said. We're having the party. You told her this is family property. It is. No, I said. Dad's inheritance helped me buy this house. It's in my name. Only my name. Something shifted behind her eyes. Flat. Hard. Don't do this today. I'm not doing anything. I'm asking why you're lying. She exhaled sharply like I was exhausting. Semantics. What's yours is family. No, I said, sharper now. It's not. She stepped closer. Her voice dropped low enough that it barely carried. You are not going to ruin your sister's day with this. I paid for this party, and you will not embarrass her in front of her fiance's family by acting like this house is some personal asset you're loaning out. My hand started shaking. That's exactly what it is. Her face changed, completely. Get out. I blinked. What? Get out. You're not welcome here. This is my house. This is Brooke's engagement party, she snapped, louder now, loud enough that heads turned. And you are trying to sabotage it. I don't know what's wrong with you, she cut in, but I'm not letting you destroy this day. Through the kitchen window, I could see Brooke on the deck, laughing, her hand resting lightly on her fiancé, Evan. She looked effortless, glowing. She hadn't even looked at me. Fine, I said. The word tasted wrong, but it came out anyway. I'll leave. I walked out the front door, past Cynthia, past strangers holding drinks in my space. No one stopped me. Outside, the air felt too sharp. I got into my car and shut the door, and the silence hit hard enough it almost knocked something loose inside me. Rage, shame, something colder underneath both. Then the front door opened again. My mother stepped out, already on her phone, her face rearranged into that same fragile, strained concern. I knew that expression. I'd watched it rewrite entire situations before. I knew what was coming before the patrol car even turned onto the street. I knew before the officers got out. I knew because this wasn't new, just escalated. Still, I stayed in the car because I needed to see how far she'd take it this time. After they told me to leave my own property, after I drove back to a Fairfield inn and sat on the edge of the bed staring at nothing long enough for the room to feel unreal, I called Daniel Mercer. He'd been my father's attorney, quiet, precise, the kind of man who didn't waste words because he didn't need to. Harper, he said when he picked up, it's been a while. I need help, I said, and then I told him everything. The party, the planner, the family property, the police. When I finished, the silence stretched just a little too long. They reported you for trespassing, he said finally, on a property you legally own. Yes. Do you have documentation accessible? Everything. Deed, mortgage, bills. It's all digital. Good, send it to me immediately. There was a pause. And Harper, do you have security footage? I blinked. The cameras. I'd installed them 2 years ago after a break-in down the road. 4 cameras. Driveway, front door, back deck, garage, cloud storage, continuous recording. I do, I said, my voice steadier now. I have all of it. Then we have leverage, Daniel said. First, I'll contact the department and formally dispute the trespassing report. Second, we're going to discuss how to prevent this from happening again. What does that mean? It means making it legally undeniable that they have no right to be there without your permission. After we hung up, I logged into the system and pulled the last 24 hours of footage. At first, it was exactly what I expected. My mother walking Cynthia through the house, gesturing confidently. This has been in our family for years, she said, pointing toward the deck. Then Brooke on the patio with Evan, her voice lower, less polished, more honest. And that's when my stomach dropped. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Same tense, same music, same assumption that I'd back down again, only this time I was already recording before I reached the door. Brooke's voice came through the footage first. "Mom's so generous letting us use the lake house. I don't know what we'd do without her." I paused the video, replayed it, the casual way she said it, like it had always been true, like I'd never existed in the equation at all. Then my mother appeared in the next clip, pacing near the driveway, phone pressed tight to her ear. "Yes, there's a woman here claiming she owns the property," she said. "I don't know who she is, but she's making threats." Timestamp 1:54 p.m., 7 minutes after I arrived. She hadn't reacted, she hadn't escalated, she had already decided. I watched it 3 times, my coffee going cold in my hands, something inside my chest tightening into a shape I couldn't quite name. Not anger, not grief, something quieter, final. Then I sent everything to Daniel. He called Monday at 8:03 a.m., precise as always. "The department reviewed your documentation," he said. "They've amended the report. You are no longer listed as a trespasser." That's it. For now, it's been reclassified as a civil property dispute. She lied to the police. "Yes," he said, "which gives us leverage." I didn't say anything. "Harper," he continued, "we have grounds for civil action, false reporting, defamation, possibly harassment. She made a demonstrably false claim with the intent to have you removed from your own property." I stared out at the Indianapolis skyline, my reflection faint in the glass. "What do you recommend?" "A formal cease and desist, both of them. We establish in writing that they have no legal claim and no permission to use the property. After that, any entry becomes trespassing. They're going to lose it." "They already have," he said. "We're just documenting it." The letters went out Tuesday morning, certified, tracked, delivered. My mother called 17 times that day. I didn't answer. Brooke texted, "What the hell is wrong with you? You're really going to ruin my wedding over a house?" I let it sit unread. Wednesday, my mother left a voicemail. Her voice shook in all the right places. "Harper, I don't know what that lawyer told you, but you're destroying this family. Your father would be ashamed." I deleted it before it finished. Thursday, Daniel called again. "Your mother retained counsel," he said. "Mitchell Cross Family Law. He wants to discuss a shared use arrangement." "There's nothing to discuss." I told him that. He suggested mediation. "Also implied your mother may claim adverse possession." I laughed. "Short, sharp. She's used it for weekends with my permission. That's not adverse possession." "Correct," Daniel said, "which means they're reaching." Good. 2 weeks later, I drove back to the house. Saturday morning, 10:47 a.m. I hadn't been back since the engagement party. Daniel had told me to show consistent presence, documentation, activity, ownership, not just on paper, but when I turned into the driveway, cars, too many, white tents in the backyard, music drifting from the deck like nothing had changed, like the letter had meant nothing. I didn't hesitate this time. I parked, pulled out my phone, and started recording before I even shut the door. Every step up the driveway felt measured, controlled, intentional. My mother opened the door before I reached for the handle. Her face drained the second she saw me. "Harper," she said tight, "what are you doing here?" I held the phone steady. "I could ask you the same thing. You received the cease and desist." Behind her, people moved through the house again. Decorations, tables, another event already in motion. Brooke appeared in the hallway. Confusion first, then anger. "Are you serious right now?" she snapped. "Connor's family is meeting everyone today." "You're really doing this?" she added. "I'm enforcing legal boundaries," I said. "Yes." My mother stepped forward, her expression collapsing into that familiar, fragile shape. "Harper, please. Just today. One more day and we'll figure something out." "You've had 2 weeks," I said. "You knew you weren't allowed here." "I thought you'd calm down," she said, her voice rising. "I thought you'd stop being vindictive and remember we're family." "Family," I repeated. "You told the police I was a stranger." Brooke cut in quickly. "That was a misunderstanding." "No," I said. "It was a lie. It's on video." Silence. Then my mother's face changed again, sharp, cold. "You're recording this?" "I'm documenting trespassing." Her eyes flicked to the phone, then back to me. "You're really going to do this to your own mother?" I didn't answer. I just kept recording. Then I called the police, and this time I didn't leave the front walk. The second time the police came, my mother expected the old story to work. It didn't. This time the officer looked at my documents, then at Denise, and the whole room seemed to tilt toward the truth. 2 officers arrived, different from the ones who had told me to leave 2 weeks earlier. I handed over my phone first, the active recording, the footage from the cameras, the call timestamp, then the deed, the mortgage statements, utility records, the letter from Daniel, and copies of the cease and desist notices both Denise and Brooke had signed for. Officer Marissa Grant, 12 years on the force according to her badge, read everything with the slow focus of someone who had seen families turn property into a weapon before. Then she looked at me. "Ms. Caldwell," she said, "this is clearly your property. Do you want these individuals removed?" My mother made a thin, wounded sound. "You can't be serious." She turned to me, her eyes wet now, because there was an audience again. "Harper, tell them this is ridiculous." I kept my hand still. "I want them removed," I said, "and I want this documented." Officer Grant nodded once. "Everyone needs to leave the premises immediately. If you return without written permission from the owner, you may be arrested for trespassing." The silence after that was almost physical. Guests began gathering bags and purses without looking at me. Evan's family folded chairs and loaded boxes into a truck, their faces carefully blank. Brooke stood on the deck, crying hard enough to smear her mascara, while Evan hovered beside her, one hand on her shoulder, looking like he'd just realized he was marrying into something he didn't understand. Denise didn't cry. She stared at me, not wounded, not confused, not maternal, just hatred, clean and bright. "You've always been jealous," she said, her voice low. "Jealous of your sister, jealous that your father loved her more, jealous because you're the broken one and everybody knows it." Officer Grant stepped between us. "Ma'am, you need to leave." Denise picked up her purse. At the edge of the driveway, she turned back one last time. "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. I had learned years ago that giving her words was like handing her matches. The story spread by Monday. Texts came in from relatives I hadn't heard from since my father's funeral. "What is going on? Your mom says you had the police remove everyone. Brooke says you ruined the wedding. Are you okay? Denise says you're unstable." I didn't answer. Tuesday morning, Daniel called. "Your mother's attorney withdrew," he said. "Already?" "Mitchell Cross sent a short email. He's no longer representing her." "Why?" "Most likely because she lied to him," Daniel said. "Attorneys dislike walking into a dispute with bad facts they weren't given." "So he saw the evidence." "I assume he saw enough." Wednesday, Brooke left a voicemail. She wasn't crying this time. Her voice was flat, cold. "You made your point, Harper. You own it. You have the power. Congratulations. I hope it was worth destroying your family over a house." I saved the message. Thursday, Daniel called again. Denise filed for mediation. I closed my eyes. For what? She's claiming emotional distress and requesting a shared use arrangement for the property. Shared use of a house I own. Yes, it won't go anywhere, but it tells us she's not done. Neither am I. The mediation was scheduled 3 weeks later. I spent those weeks documenting everything, every voicemail, every text, every screenshot, every Venmo request, every receipt, every second of footage where Denise called my house family property and Brooke thanked her for letting them use it. By the time we sat in the conference room with a mediator named Linda Barrett, I had a binder thick enough to make Denise stop smiling when she saw it. Denise arrived with a binder, too. Of course she did. "I've contributed for years," she said, sliding receipts across the table. "Utilities, maintenance, furnishings. I made that house what it is." I opened mine. "These are my mortgage statements," I said. 4 years of payments from my account. I placed them down. "These are utility bills, all in my name, paid from my accounts." Another stack. "Insurance, property taxes, repair invoices, maintenance contracts." Denise's jaw tightened. I pulled out the final section. "And these are the Venmo requests my mother sent me for events she hosted at my house. Catering, rentals, decorations, cleaning, including the $4,200 I paid for Brooke's engagement party." Denise went pale. Linda reviewed everything in silence. The kind of silence that makes guilty people start shifting in their chairs. When she finally looked up, her face gave nothing away. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said, "based on these records, you have no legal ownership interest in this property." Denise's new attorney, younger and less confident than the first one, cleared his throat. There was an implied family understanding. Do you have a deed? Linda asked. He stopped. A written contract? No answer. Documented evidence of ownership? Denise looked at me like I had betrayed her by keeping records of my own life. Linda closed the folder. Then there is nothing to mediate. This is Ms. Caldwell's property. The whole thing ended in 20 minutes. As we packed up, Denise leaned across the table, her voice low enough for only me. You've always been selfish, she hissed, just like your father said. For once, I didn't flinch. I looked straight at her. Dad left me that money for a reason. Maybe you should think about what the reason was. Then I walked out before she could rewrite that too. The final lock clicked into place 6 months later. Not just on the doors, on the version of me they used to enter whenever they wanted. I changed every lock, installed a keypad gate, hired a property management company to check the house when I wasn't there. Cameras stayed on, records stayed backed up. Brooke married Evan in October at a country club outside Peoria. I wasn't invited. Denise sent a Christmas card with no note, just a family photo where everyone smiled in coordinated sweaters, arranged carefully around the space where I used to stand. I framed it. Then I hung it in my lake house office, right beside the deed. Not as proof of what I lost, as proof of what I kept. Because that was what those months taught me. Some people will take every inch you offer and still call you cruel for not giving them the walls too. They will rewrite memory, weaponize blood, and make your boundaries sound like violence. But paperwork doesn't perform. Deeds don't cry on command. Camera footage doesn't flinch. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand on your own front walk with your hands steady and say, "This is mine," not to punish anyone, to stop letting them punish you. Last weekend, I drove up before sunrise and sat on the deck with coffee warming my hands. No tents, no strangers, no music covering up the sound of the water. No one telling me I was selfish for existing in a place I had built from nothing but grief, work, and signatures no one could erase. Just me, the house, the quiet. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. This is Evan. I'm sorry about everything. For what it's worth, Brooke knows you were right. She's just too proud to say it. I read it twice, then deleted it, because I wasn't waiting for apologies anymore. I was finally living in my own house. By the time I saw the email, the damage had already been done. They weren't threatening me. They were celebrating. The subject line sat there like a door locking from the other side. Don't come back early. I was in a hotel corridor in Minneapolis, dressed for a client meeting, holding a paper cup of coffee I hadn't touched. In less than 2 minutes, I was supposed to walk into a boardroom and explain how a company had been bleeding money without noticing. Then my mother's message appeared. I opened it expecting another complaint about the neighbors, the thermostat, the lawn crew, or some imaginary slight she had been nursing since she moved into my house. That was not what she sent. It was neat, almost smug. 3 short paragraphs from Diane Mercer, my mother, explaining that she and my older sister Tara had decided they deserved a new beginning. They had taken the savings they believed I would never recover, emptied my home, packed my furniture, jewelry, electronics, and my grandmother's keepsakes into a truck and left for Kauai. The final sentence was the part she probably enjoyed writing most. We're starting over in Hawaii. Have fun being poor and alone. I stared at it once, twice. Then I read it again, slower, letting every word settle. And then I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, because pain and preparation can exist in the same body. That smile was the kind that shows up when people who underestimated you finally step into the exact trap they built for themselves. They thought they had stripped me bare. They had no idea whose life they had actually touched. My name is Mara Mercer. I'm 34 and I work in financial operations. Businesses hire me when money starts slipping through places nobody wants to examine too closely. My job is to find leaks before they turn into collapses. I notice patterns. I document everything. I protect access. I don't trust verbal promises when a paper trail can do the work better. I save receipts the way some people save apologies. So when Diane and Tara decided I was an easy target, they made one serious mistake. They assumed being family meant I wasn't watching. I had been watching for months. My father, Alan Mercer, had died a year and a half earlier. No warning, no long illness, just a heart attack that took him before anyone had time to prepare a sentence beginning with "at least." He left behind a modest life insurance payout, an old Ram 1500, and the same crooked family structure we had lived inside for decades. Tara was the center of it, not officially. Nobody said it out loud. They didn't have to. In our house, Tara's chaos was always treated like weather damage. Unfortunate, it. Expensive, nobody's fault. My problems were treated like poor planning. Tara was 4 years older, and from childhood, my mother arranged the world around her discomfort. Tara needed help. Tara needed patience. Tara needed another chance. I needed to stop making things difficult. When Tara totaled her car at 19, Diane helped replace it. When Tara quit 2 colleges, buried herself in credit card debt, and drifted from job to job, my mother called her overwhelmed. When I earned scholarships, worked brutal weekend shifts, graduated near the top of my class, and built a career without asking for rescue, Diane called me fortunate. After my father died, she said she couldn't stay by herself. She was 61, healthy, and fully capable of managing her own home, but grief has a way of making guilt sound like responsibility, so I let her move in. Then Tara needed a place, temporarily. Temporary became permanent in the quiet way bad arrangements do. I owned a 4-bedroom house in Raleigh, North Carolina, bought when I was 29. I paid the mortgage. I paid the utilities, insurance, property taxes, groceries, internet, streaming services, and the yard maintenance Diane insisted was necessary so people wouldn't think we had let ourselves go. I scheduled repairs, I drove Diane to appointments, I handled everything left over from my father's estate. I traveled for work and came home to a house where 2 grown women treated my stability like something they were entitled to resent. They never said thank you. They said the Wi-Fi was slow. At first, the signs were so small I could talk myself out of them. Tara began asking strange little questions about my money, not direct enough to accuse her of anything, just enough to leave a mark. Do you keep your savings at the same bank as your checking? Is that the card you use for bills? Can you move big amounts from your phone? She said it lightly, like curiosity, like she was trying to get her own life together. I wanted to believe that. Then my mail started looking wrong. An envelope would be sealed, but not the way I sealed it. A crease would sit differently. A corner would lift too cleanly. Once could be nothing. Twice could be coincidence. By the 5th time, I stopped pretending. Diane changed too. Whenever I paid bills at the kitchen island, she would appear nearby. Not talking, not helping, just standing there with a mug she never drank from, her gaze drifting over my shoulder toward the laptop screen. If I shifted the computer, she shifted too. Quietly, carefully, like she thought I wouldn't notice because daughters are supposed to mistake surveillance for concern. I noticed. Still, I waited, because suspicion is not proof, and proof was something I understood. The first real crack opened on a Tuesday afternoon in March, 6 months before that email landed in Minneapolis. I caught her before she had time to hide what she was really measuring. Not money, access. I came back from a client trip and found Tara sitting at my desk in the home office, her back to the doorway, shoulders tight in a way that made the whole room feel staged. In front of her was a calculator, a sheet of paper covered in numbers, and one of my printed bank statements, the kind I had tossed into the recycling bin after tearing it in half. She heard me before I spoke. Her hand moved first, fast. She folded the paper under her palm and turned around with a face that wasn't guilty. That would have been almost comforting. No. Tara looked irritated, like I had interrupted something she was entitled to finish. Just using your desk, she said. I looked at the calculator, then at the statement, then at her hand, still pressed flat over the page. I said nothing. That silence did more than an accusation could have. Her mouth tightened, but she didn't move her hand. She waited for me to make it easier for her. I didn't. I walked upstairs, shut my bedroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed with both hands resting in my lap like I was keeping them from doing something reckless. I wasn't scared. Not exactly. It was colder than fear. Cleaner. It was the feeling of a quiet assumption snapping in half. The thing I had labeled maybe nothing was not nothing. It had shape. It had direction. It had been standing in my house for months, watching me type passwords from the kitchen doorway. That night, I called Graham Walsh. Graham had been my personal attorney for 6 years. 47, former corporate litigator, now running a private practice in Boise, focused on asset protection and civil disputes. He had the kind of voice that made chaos sit down and wait its turn. Low, precise, never rushed. I told him what I had walked in on. For a moment, all I heard was the faint click of his keyboard. Then he asked, "How much of your finances could they piece together?" I looked toward my closed bedroom door. "Too much." His answer came without hesitation. "Then we move first." That sentence became the start of 6 months of work nobody in my house knew was happening. Graham's first call was to Renee Callahan, a forensic accountant with 15 years in fraud documentation and asset tracing. Renee treated spreadsheets like crime scenes. Nothing bored her if it had dates, transfers, and people pretending crunching numbers did not mean what they meant. She reviewed my accounts, household expenses, shared access history, and the small withdrawals I had been trying not to overthink. Amounts under $200, odd intervals, always from the household account Diane had been allowed to use for groceries and utilities. Within a week, Renee sent over a 14-page report showing unauthorized activity stretching back 11 months. 11 months. Tara had not been testing boundaries. She had been practicing. Graham and Renee rebuilt the structure quietly. The $500,000 Diane believed was sitting in my primary savings account was moved into a protected investment ladder split across 3 instruments tied to my consulting LLC. What remained visible was not what they thought it was. It was a temporary holding balance connected to vendor payments and a traceable disbursement from a separate estate matter. Legal funds, real funds, but arranged so that anyone touching them without authorization would leave a bright, ugly trail through banking systems, state lines, and federal wire fraud exposure. I photographed everything valuable in the house: serial numbers, receipts, insurance appraisals, the restored vintage turntable my father and I had worked on together, my grandmother's silver candlesticks, the jewelry Diane liked to mention only when she thought I wasn't listening. Several expensive pieces I believe Tara had already been researching were quietly swapped for insured replicas after Renee found appraisal searches in the browser history of the family tablet. Tara used that tablet every night. She thought no one monitored it. She was wrong. I upgraded the security system too. Cloud backup, private server, no access for Diane, no access for Tara, cameras and audio at the front entry, living room, kitchen, and exterior porch. Then I updated the ownership records on 2 storage units and removed Diane from the account she had been using for household expenses. I replaced it with a limited use card capped at $600. Every charge triggered an alert on my phone. And then I waited. I didn't know the date. I didn't know the exact move, but I knew the pattern. I had spent 9 years identifying what financial predation looked like before people were brave enough to call it theft. I just hadn't expected to recognize it in my own hallway. The trip to Minneapolis landed on my calendar in early October. 4 days with a mid-sized logistics company that needed its operations budget rebuilt before the next quarter. I told Diane and Tara 2 weeks ahead of time. I watched both of them. Tara nodded too quickly and left the room. Diane asked what morning I was flying out. Neither response was dramatic. Both were wrong. I left on Monday. By Tuesday afternoon, while I was 3 hours into a budget review on the 14th floor of a downtown office building, Diane's email arrived. We're starting over in Hawaii. Have fun being poor and alone. I stood in that hotel hallway and breathed through my nose for 45 seconds. My chest locked. My fingers went numb around the phone. Something climbed into my throat, sharp and animal, but I swallowed it before it became sound. Not there. Not where anyone could see what they had tried to take from me. The call came before I even had time to sit down. Not a check-in, not confusion. Panic already cracking through the line, but before that, there was procedure. I forwarded the email to Graham without adding a single word. Then I called the bank's fraud division directly. I didn't go through general support. I had a contact, Elise Navarro, senior fraud specialist, assigned 6 months earlier when Graham insisted we plan for worst case behavior with familiar faces. Then I opened my laptop and accessed the security archive. The truck had arrived at 9:14 a.m. Diane had unlocked the front door at 9:11. 3 minutes. That was all it took for intention to turn into action. The footage loaded clean. 2 movers. Tara walking ahead of them, pointing, moving fast, already in control of the space like it belonged to her. Her voice carried clearly through the audio. At one point, she said, almost lightly, "Start with anything worth real money." I sat in a chair in the hotel hallway and watched 14 minutes of my life being dismantled. The sofa, the dining table, framed photos lifted off walls without hesitation. My grandmother's silver, the record player my father and I restored together. Even the throw blankets, folded neatly like they were doing me a favor. Room by room, efficient, upbeat, like this was a project. I closed the laptop, stood up, walked into the meeting, delivered the full presentation without missing a transition, because they were not taking that too. By 6 that evening, Graham had already moved faster than they ever expected me to. Emergency reports were filed with Charlotte PD, the bank's internal fraud division, and a federal reporting channel. Movement of stolen assets across state lines combined with electronic transfer activity triggered jurisdiction under federal wire fraud statutes. He also found something they didn't realize they had exposed. Diane had forwarded a booking confirmation to a shared family email account she forgot I still had access to. That mistake unraveled everything. They had rented a luxury condo in Honolulu, 6 weeks, nearly $5,000 a week, paid with a debit card tied directly to the account we had already flagged. Graham contacted the property manager with documentation. The response was immediate, cooperative, careful, professional. No one wants to be in the middle of a fraud case when paperwork starts stacking up. Elise confirmed within 2 hours. The account Diane accessed was frozen. The transfer she believed had gone through had been routed into review. Standard protocol when large amounts move from accounts flagged for irregular activity. The money wasn't gone. It was locked. Every dollar documented. Every movement recorded. Exactly where I needed it. I booked the earliest flight back. When I stepped into the house at 11:22 p.m., the silence hit differently. Not quiet. Vacant. The entryway was stripped bare. No rug. No console. No photograph of my father and me at my graduation. The one that had been there for 5 years like a fixed point. The wall hooks were empty. The air smelled faintly of packing tape and something final. I didn't linger. Latex gloves on. Graham had been explicit. Treat the house like an evidence site. I documented everything. Every empty mount. Every crooked drawer they pulled and didn't bother to realign. Shelves wiped clean like they were erasing fingerprints without understanding what actually mattered. Then I went to the kitchen. The safe was open. A printed note sat on the floor beside it. Diane had taken the visible envelope. $800 in emergency cash I had left there intentionally, along with documents designed to look like account summaries. She took all of it, which told me she believed she had found everything. She hadn't. Under the bottom shelf, taped flat, was a small index card. My handwriting. 5 words. Check the account names again. I photographed it where it was, then removed it carefully and slid it into my bag. Evidence doesn't need to stay behind once it's documented. I poured myself a glass of water after that. It was the only thing left in the house I actually needed. Then I waited. The first call came at 7:43 a.m. Tara. I let it ring out. Diane followed. 7:51. 7:53. 8:02. By the fourth call, 8:09, I answered. She didn't say hello. She hasn't in years. That absence isn't emotional. It's just consistent. Her voice came in sharp, stretched thin. Mara, what did you do? We need help right now. The card's not working. The transfer is frozen. The condo office is outside asking about payment, and Tara says the bank told her everything's under review. I leaned back against the empty kitchen counter. Outside, a sprinkler clicked rhythmically across a neighbor's lawn. Normal. Completely normal. Help with what? I asked. There was a pause. Not long. Just enough for something unfamiliar to enter her thinking. With these accounts, she said. Faster now? What kind of accounts are these? I closed my eyes for 1 second. Just long enough to picture her face. Confused. Off balance. Still trying to understand how this wasn't working the way she expected. Then I answered. The kind that belonged to me. Tara took the phone like grabbing it hard enough could change what had already been recorded. I heard wind first, then traffic, then her breathing, too close to the speaker. Stop playing games, she snapped. Whatever you reported, undo it. We're stuck here, and this is your fault. I looked around my empty kitchen. The counter where my coffee machine used to sit had 4 pale rectangles in the dust. I didn't take anything, I said. You did. A beat of silence. Not because she understood, because she hated hearing the words in that order. You took my property, I said. You emptied my house. And Diane sent me a written confession with a subject line. From somewhere behind her, my mother shouted, "That email was between family." I wrote that sentence down the second the call ended. Word for word. When I read it to Graham, he laughed for 10 full seconds. Not because it was funny, because sometimes arrogance is so cleanly documented it almost feels generous. That email was between family. Diane had sent a written account of felony theft to my work email on a Tuesday morning and still believed privacy was something she could claim after pressing send. I told them I would not discuss anything further without my attorney present. Then I ended the call. Over the next 72 hours, everything began locking into place. Not theatrically, methodically, the way a well-prepared file becomes a case. One confirmed fact after another. My neighbor across the street, Janice Miller, had been watering my plants while I was away. She had seen the moving truck that Tuesday morning and thought Diane was acting strange enough to record a short video on her phone. 47 seconds. Clear picture. Clear audio. Tara stood in the doorway, directing movers through my house like she owned it. Her voice came through clean. Start with anything worth real money. Don't waste time on the books. Janice had texted me that evening asking if everything was okay. I called her immediately. I asked her to save the video, not send it around, and gave her Graham's direct number. A detective from Charlotte PD's Property Crimes Unit was assigned 2 days later. Her name was Detective Elaine Porter. 12 years on the job, the last several focused on residential theft and financial fraud. She was precise in a way I recognized. Calm, unimpressed by emotion, careful with every word. She wrote things down even when she clearly remembered them, not because she needed help, because records survive tone. She reviewed my security footage, Janice's video, Diane's email, and Renee's financial report in one long session at her desk. When she finished, she set the folder down and looked at me. "You've basically done the front half of this case for us," I said. "It's not my first audit." Her mouth moved like she almost smiled. The movers were contacted within 48 hours. They gave statements confirming Diane had hired them and paid with a debit card tied to the flagged account. They said Tara directed the loadout. They said they had been told I knew about it. They cooperated completely. Their invoice went straight into the formal documentation packet. Then Honolulu started closing around Diane and Tara. The property manager confirmed the condo payment had failed. Graham had already looped in Marissa Keene, a civil litigation attorney in Hawaii, who sent the proper documentation fast enough that no one had room to pretend this was a family misunderstanding. Diane had tried 2 backup cards. Both triggered review. By then, she and Tara were in Honolulu with stolen furniture they could not unload quickly, accounts they could not access, a luxury condo they could not pay for, and an email in my inbox that explained exactly what they had done in Diane's own words. 4 days after the first call, my phone rang again. I was sitting at the folding card table I had bought from a drugstore because my actual table was somewhere in Hawaii with 2 women who had mistaken theft for strategy. The number had a Honolulu area code. I answered, a lawyer's office. Diane and Tara had retained local counsel, Brent Halverson, general practice, who sounded like a man already regretting the intake call. He spent 2 minutes using careful professional language. Then he put Diane on. Her voice was different. The anger was still there. Diane did not release anger easily. She carried it like proof she had been wronged. But underneath it, there was something smaller, something that knew the floor had moved. "I want to understand," she said slowly, "what exactly those accounts were. And why the money isn't accessible." I looked at the empty wall where my father's graduation photo had been. "The accounts are mine," I said. "The money is mine. The property removed from my house is mine. Documentation of all of that is currently with a Charlotte detective, a forensic accountant, civil counsel in Hawaii, and the Federal Reporting Division handling interstate property crimes." Silence. Not peaceful, active. "The email you sent," I continued, "the one titled 'Don't Come Back Early,' that has been submitted as Exhibit A." More silence. Then my mother said the sentence that explained everything and excused nothing. "I just wanted Tara to have a real life." There it was. Not regret, not responsibility, not even shame trying to disguise itself. Just the same old math she had used my entire life. Tara needed, so I paid. Tara hurt, so I adjusted. Tara failed, so I absorbed the damage. A car, tuition, debt, years of free housing. And now my savings, my furniture, my grandmother's silver. I had been treated like a resource attached to a heartbeat, and Diane was still speaking as if that made sense. I looked at the empty kitchen around me. "I know," I said. "That's why I kept records." The legal process was not dramatic. Nobody kicked down a door. Nobody gave a speech in court while my mother and sister cried in the front row. Real consequences are quieter than that. They arrive as filings, deadlines, notarized statements, exhibit labels, insurance forms, payment schedules, and lawyers leaving careful voicemails because every word now matters. Brent Halverson negotiated a civil settlement for Diane because a full trial would have made everything public in a way she could not survive financially or socially. The settlement required structured repayment of the misused funds, return or replacement value for the property removed from my house, and a formal court-filed acknowledgement that the removal had not been authorized. Tara had fewer options. She was on camera. She was on audio. Her name was tied to the moving crew, and her fingerprints were all over the transfer attempts. Her restitution agreement was handled through Marissa Keene and Detective Porter. It included supervision and a probationary structure that could turn criminal fast if she violated it. Between recovered property, insurance payouts, and restitution, I got back about 91% of what they took. Real life leaves dents. I knew it would. Some relatives believed Diane at first. Of course they did. She reached them before I did, and her version had been polished down until the theft almost sounded generous. She had borrowed family money. Tara was in crisis. I had become cold after my father died. For 2 weeks, cousins sent careful messages that said nothing directly. An aunt stopped picking up. Then people saw the email. Then they saw the footage. Then they heard Tara's voice telling movers to take everything worth real money and ignore the books. Diane's softened story collapsed under the weight of dates, documents, and her own words. Some relatives apologized, some went silent, a few disappeared completely. I let them. I had spent too much of my life auditioning for fairness from people who already knew the lines and still refused to say them. Within 3 months, I rebuilt the house. Not just with furniture, with intention. I bought a dining table alone on a Saturday afternoon from a local shop in Raleigh. No one complained about the finish. No one asked whether Tara would like it. No one stood beside me acting wounded because I chose something for myself. I rehung art. I repainted 2 rooms. I turned Tara's old bedroom into my office. A standing desk, 2 monitors, a real chair, clean shelves, locked files. Within 60 days, I was running 2 new client contracts from the room where she had spent 3 years making chaos feel like something I owed her patience for. That part felt good. I won't pretend it didn't. Diane called once more, 6 weeks after the settlement was signed. She asked whether there was any chance we could rebuild. I sat with the question. I thought about 11 years of working, paying, showing up, staying useful enough to be tolerated. I thought about opened mail, Tara at my desk, the calculator, the bank statement, the email, have fun being poor and alone. And then Diane's voice from that Honolulu lobby saying she only wanted Tara to have a real life, as if mine was just spare material. I don't know, I said. Maybe someday, not now. She hung up first, so here is the part people misunderstand. I did not set a trap, I prepared. That difference matters. I noticed what was happening. I documented it. I protected myself from a threat that was already forming inside my own home. What Diane and Tara later called a trap was just consequence with paperwork. When you steal from someone who keeps records, the records become the thing waiting for you. That is not cruelty. That is accounting. People who steal from family rely on one assumption, that love will make you hesitate. That guilt will slow your hand, that you will be too embarrassed to file reports, too hurt to think clearly, too afraid of being called cold to protect what is yours. Diane spent 34 years teaching me that lesson. I finally stopped learning it. I am not telling this because I want applause for being strong. I am telling it because I was quiet, careful, and thorough for 6 months while my family planned to hollow out my life. And the only reason I still had my money, my house, and my future afterward is because I treated what was happening as what it was. Not a misunderstanding, not family drama, a documented crime before it finished becoming one. Trust is not surrender, loyalty is not unlimited access, and documentation is not paranoia. Sometimes it is the only thing standing between your mother screaming, "Whose accounts were those?" and you having nothing left to answer with.